Okay.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I was playing some music earlier. I thought it would be energizing, so. But now we're right at the time, so I'm not going to play any music.
That's okay. We got people trickling in. Hopefully we'll get a good crowd.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I do have something at 3. I told him I might be a few minutes late, so we'll try to keep the schedule as close as we can.
Absolutely. So thank you for the verbiage yesterday that you and Murray put out together. That was beautiful. Yeah, I never knew Murray would keep track of numbers, but when he came, what did he say, 56.2% of my calls are appraisal, I said, holy smokes, this is serious. So
Yeah, but his next line was 80% of statistics are made up on the spot. So
correct. Yeah. And Bob and I had a couple of questions about that thing.
yeah.
So, I don't know if you want me to answer it, ask it now or just wait.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
if you want to go ahead and ask.
Yeah, so Murray said add writer F, which we knew, writer F, and then add that as a secondary, and that says that it waives the financing contingency.
Mhm.
Okay. What about writer E? Do we still use this with writer E?
So that was my questioning as well. He and I kind of went back and forth on the use of this, and especially that last paragraph.
Yes,
Exactly.
exactly.
And yeah, so if it's FHA-VA, it sounds like this is going to preempt those rights that the buyer might have under those programs as well.
Correct. Now, the one thing though, at the bottom of E, the VA says, and I quote, if the buyer still wants to move forward, they still have the right to do it. So that waives that right there. You know what I mean? But on the FHA side, does it waive it if we put that in there? You know,
it sounds like, however, there are specific requirements that need to be met under that FHA-VA. So I think you would still need to comply in order to take advantage of this new language.
Okay.
Just to be certain, because we don't know.
Perfect. So yeah, I kind of said that too. FHA is still going to govern what you're supposed to do. So you still have to abide by that beforehand. So that's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Exactly.
That was easy enough.
All right, well, let's get going. If you can see my virtual background, this is a shameless capitalist plug for my book that you can find on Amazon. I didn't put the link in the chat. That would have been a little bit over the top, but I do have the virtual background for it. So I'm going to start sharing my screen because today we're talking about critical dates under the as-is contract. So the first thing I'm going to share is a document that I put together to help people, and we're not listening to this. Sorry, I need to find the right. Oh shoot. Okay, let me find the right document. And this is the one that I want to show you first. So this is something that I developed, and I'll put it into the chat. This is a resource for you that you can use as you plot out all of the times in your contract. Because I get a lot of questions from people who are saying, well, we have this date, but this thing already happened that shouldn't have happened before that date because the time periods were out of sync. Does that make sense? Has anybody ever seen a transaction where the closing date was scheduled for after or before the end of the loan approval period. Yeah, that happens sometimes because people want a quick closing and the default for the loan approval period is 30 days. So that's one example of why we want to keep track of all these things. So this just goes through all of the points in the contract where we talk about dates and times, and it will tell you what happens to it, right? If it falls on a Saturday, Sunday, national legal holiday, we know that with 2 exceptions, we're always going to move forward to the next business day at 5 p.m., right? The 2 exceptions are time for acceptance and time for the effective date. So again, I'm going to put this in the chat for you. This is a resource. You can see I just go through the whole contract and all of the lines and the time periods, and I just explain what they are and where they are. All right. Now, the next one is something that we're actually going to use here with our class. So can everyone see the share? Are we good with that? Okay. So what I've done here is I've gone through the contract. We're going to do like a little play transaction here with dates, and we'll see how the time periods work. And if you look at the paragraph numbers or the line numbers, it says 6, 3, 7, right? So obviously not in numerical order. What these correspond to is the paragraph numbers on this document, right? So if you see number 6 here, it says time for acceptance of contract. And if you look over here, it says specifies acceptance, right? So that's the reference here. Does that make sense to everybody? So at first it seems like, what in the world is she doing? But that's what is going on here. So you can refer back to that other document on the paragraphs that are numbered here so that you can get more information about exactly where it is in the contract. Does that make sense? All right, so we're going to pretend that our transaction is an as-is contract, and we're going to, oh, sorry. Okay, can everybody see this screen where I have the as-is contract? Okay. All right, so here we go. Everything is filled in. We're just going to look at the dates, and we're going to go through pretty quickly. So I apologize for that. And now I'm going to go back to this. So what we're saying here is that we're going to specify the time for acceptance is May 15th. Okay, buyer has signed, where this is in the future, this is next month. Buyer signs on the 12th and specifies time for acceptance on Saturday. Okay, remember that's an exception to how we count time. So that's when that expires. It's going to expire on Saturday the 15th. So before then or by then, we want some other things to happen, right? The seller needs to respond. We need to have an effective contract, all of that kind of stuff. Now, at the time of the offer, this is all we can do, right? We're going to specify that closing is going to occur on June 14th. So we're saying, okay, we want to close in about 30 days. So that's approximately 30 days to close, right? Now, let's say that on the, sorry, there's a typo here. Seller counter offers on the 15th. That should have been on the 15th. So that's on Saturday, right? That was the time for acceptance. And we say that seller counter offers at 11:58 p.m. Is that a timely counter offer? Because they responded on the date that they needed to respond, right? Unless the buyer has specified a time by which they need to respond, then 11:58, 11:59 is okay, right? Because it's still on the date. Now, once the seller counter offers, the contract says that the buyer has 2 days to respond to that counter offer, unless the seller has said otherwise. So that puts us to Monday, right? So let's pretend that the buyer accepts the seller's counter offer. They initial all the changes. They send it back on Monday, the 17th. And we're all good. We have an effective contract, right? They send it back at 11:58 p.m. or 11:59 p.m. We all good? Yeah. Unless the seller has specified, I want to hear back by 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. or whatever time, right? So now we have an effective contract. Our effective date is the 17th, right? And if we're closing on June 14th, that means we have exactly 28 days for all the stuff that needs to happen under the contract. That's day 0. Now, the next thing is our escrow, right? The contract says escrow is going to be due within X number of days after the effective date. It defaults to 3 days. We didn't change it. So 3 days later, escrow, and that's going to be Thursday, the 20th. Is this making sense to everybody? If anybody has questions, just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask, because when I'm sharing like this, I can't really follow what's going on in the chat. All right. Now the contract also allows for possibly additional escrow, right? So let's scroll down and look at this. Here it says in paragraph B, additional escrow. And if we leave it blank, then it's within 10 days after the effective date. So we're going to pretend that the seller's counteroffer included additional escrow that is going to be due within 13 days after the effective date. Because we figure, okay, let's get past the inspection period and then 3 more days, right? So 13 days after the effective date. That's going to be on Sunday, the 30th. Well, Saturday, Sunday, national legal holiday, we go forward to the next business day at 5 p.m., right? So Sunday, we count forward to Monday, but guess what? Monday is Memorial Day. That means we go forward to Tuesday, June 1st by 5 p.m. Calendar days end just before midnight. Business days end at 5 p.m. So anytime you're going to move forward in your time period to the next business day, it's going to end at 5 p.m. All right. Our next thing we're going to talk about is in paragraph 6 right here, where it says our property is subject to leases or occupancy after closing. So this box has been checked. That means that the seller must provide copies of the leases within 5 days after the effective date. So our effective date is the 17th. We're counting 5 days. That puts us on Saturday, the 22nd. Guess what? We go to Monday, the 24th. Once the buyer gets those leases, they have 5 days to review. So 5 days from the 24th puts us again on a Saturday, the 29th. Boom, we're on Monday, the 31st. But again, Memorial Day. So we go to Tuesday, June 1st by 5 p.m. Is everybody tracking how we do this? And can you see how many moving parts there are, which is why it's so critical to track your critical dates under the contract, right? Okay. Now, we're going to talk about this now rather than come back to it later. So we get a second bite at this apple for the buyer, because the contract here says that we're going to provide copies of the leases. But if you move forward into the standards in paragraph 18, we talk about leases. So let's just scroll down. Sorry to give you motion sickness here. But in paragraph 18, we talk about leases again. And it says that within 10 days prior to closing, sorry, I'm trying to scroll back up now. I went too far. Okay, so here we are at D. Can everyone see this? So prior to closing, the seller is going to give estoppel letters to the buyer, right? And just like an estoppel letter from a lender or an HOA, the current status of everything to do with the lease in terms of the rent that's due, the rent that's late, security deposits, pet deposits, all of that kind of stuff. And If that doesn't match everything that was presented before, or if the seller's not able to provide those, then the buyer could actually contact the tenants directly. And if any of that information doesn't match what was provided before, early on in the transaction, then the buyer could potentially terminate the contract. So here's how it could work. Those estoppel letters and the affidavit are due 10 days prior to closing. We're closing on June 14th, so we're on Friday, June 4th. Buyer has 5 days to review all of that information and perhaps exercise the option to terminate. So that puts us at Wednesday, June 9th. So there we are, 5 days away from closing, and potentially buyer could terminate the contract. Again, that's another example of why it's so important to track these dates, especially if you have tenants in the property. Okay, loan approval. We're in paragraph 8. So let's go back up in the contract to paragraph 8. And the default is 30 days, right, for loan approval. So here it says loan approval. If left blank, then 30 days at line 87. Can everyone see that? So we're closing in 28 days because our effective date is May 17th. We're closing on June 14th. That's only 28 days. So remember, we don't want to have a closing date that occurs before the end of the loan approval period. So we're going to modify our loan approval period. We don't have 30 days. And we're going to say 15 days for loan approval. Good luck with that, right? Nevertheless, June 1st is when our loan approval period ends. So on or before June 1st, the buyer must give notice to the seller. And there are 3 options for that notice. The first one is, yay, I got loan approval, or I didn't get loan approval and I'm going to go forward with it anyway, meaning I've waived my financing contingency, or I didn't get loan approval and I'm going to terminate the contract. Okay. If the buyer doesn't give one of those notices, even if they got loan approval, if they fail to give that notice, then the seller has 3 days after the end of the loan approval period in which to terminate the contract. This is one of the rare instances where the seller has the right to terminate. So what that would look like is Tuesday, end of loan approval period, seller gives notice on Friday. Boom, you're out. We're 10 days away from closing. All right. Pretty harsh. And yet it happens. It has happened to people. So be very careful about tracking that date. Now, the contract also says a little farther down in the paragraph there that the buyer is going to make loan application within 5 days after the effective date. Well, we know how that works, right? Effective date was the 17th. 5 days puts us on Saturday, the 22nd. We go forward to Monday, the 24th. Our next deadline is going to be title evidence. So let's move forward to title evidence. And here we go at line 145. Okay, title evidence and insurance at least, and it defaults to 15 days before closing for a financed transaction, 5 days before closing for a cash transaction. Then the buyer is going to get title evidence, and the contract defines what that means. It's the commitment plus copies, legible copies of everything that's going to appear as an exception on the title commitment. Okay, so that is going to be Sunday, the 30th. Well, our next business day is Memorial Day, May 31st. So the next business day after that is going to be Tuesday, June 1st by 5 p.m. So by Tuesday, the 1st at 5 p.m., the buyer must receive title evidence. Then buyer has 5 days to review that title evidence. So there we are on Tuesday. 5 days later goes Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So we're on the 6th. We go forward to Monday, the 7th at 5 p.m. and the buyer needs to give notice to the seller of any title defects. And the contract treats the survey in the same way. So survey and title defects, same timeframes. Our next one is the owner's policy and survey. The contract says if those things are available and the seller has them, then they need to provide copies within 5 days after the effective date. So the seller is going to give a copy of the current title policy to the buyer and to the closing agent. That's going to be Saturday, the 22nd, just saw a typo. That goes to Monday, the 25th, right? So, is that right? Is that another typo? Yeah, it is. I apologize. I'll fix this and then I'll send it out to everybody. I'll put it in the forum. So we're going to allow them to review all of that information, and perhaps the title company could save some money in issuing the new policy for the buyer. So that's why we do it. And also, if there's a survey, then the seller is going to provide a copy of that to the buyer. All right, so let's go back to title examination. So 5 days after we get the title evidence, then the buyer is going to give notice of any title defects. And then if there are title defects, the seller has a cure period. The contract says it's 30 days for cure. Well, if anyone's done title work, 30 days is not going to do much of anything unless it's very, very simple. You won't even get started for 30 days. So 30 days for a cure period. We're assuming that buyer gives notice on Monday, June 7th. That starts our 30-day period. That takes us to July 7th. And then the contract says that if something is happening and we need that cure period, then we're going to close on the closing date or within 10 days after the notice of the cure. So if seller's able to get everything resolved before the 14th, boom, we're going to close on the 14th. If not, then we're going to go 10 days after we get notice of everything is taken care of. If the seller is not able to fix all the title defects within the cure period, then within 5 days after the end of the cure period, so remember our cure period ends on Wednesday, July 7th. So that means we're going forward to Monday, July 12th. Then the buyer can give notices. And one option is for the buyer to extend the cure period for a specific period. The contract says for a specific period, not to exceed 120 days. Wow, that's a long time because we're already 30 days in, right? And now we're going for 120 days more. That's a long time, and most people are not willing to wait it out. The other option is that the buyer will accept the property as it is with all the title defects, or the buyer can terminate. So you see, if there's a title defect, the buyer has to wait out the 30-day cure period in order to get to the point where they could actually terminate the contract. So that's, I've actually talked with some agents recently where there has been an issue with title and the cure periods kicked in. But you got to go through that initial cure period in order to reach the point where the buyer has the option to terminate. All right, so our next one is interesting, and I'm going to show you in the contract because this is one that a lot of people overlook. It's in paragraph 10. I do a class called 10 for 10 because there are 10 disclosures in paragraph 10. And this one is the only one that has a fill in the blank, and it is at paragraph D right here. And you can see it says flood zone elevation certification. And there's a lot of if this, then that, if this, then that. You got to walk through the maze to get to this point. And if you are able to get to this point, then it says at line 209 to 10, buyer may terminate this contract by delivering written notice to the seller within blank days. and it defaults to 20 after the effective date. Okay, so this is a special inspection period, if you will, that relates only to flood zone and elevation certification issues. So my suggestion, just in terms of administrative ease under the contract, is to make that time period coincide with the inspection period. Because otherwise you've got this weird 20-day period out there that you need to be tracking. If you make it coincide with your inspection period, whatever it is, then it's easy to keep track of, and you know that all of the due diligence is going to happen within that time period. You don't have some outlier there. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. And now we're at paragraph 12. So I'll go back here. Paragraph 12 in the contract when we talk about inspection, right? So the contract defaults to 15 days after the effective date. In our scenario, we're going to say 10 days. So 10 days after the effective date. Remember, our effective date was the 17th. That's going to put us at Thursday, the 27th. So 10 days after our effective date, that is our inspection period on the 27th. Now, it also says that we can do a walkthrough or re-inspection the day prior to or the day of closing. Our closing is on Monday, June 14th. So the day before would be Sunday. I always recommend that you do that walkthrough as close to the time of closing as possible, because a lot can happen. A lot can happen on Sunday night after you do your walkthrough inspection, right? So if at all possible, do the walkthrough on the day of closing. And in our case, that would be on Monday, June 14th. All right. So our next date that we're going to talk about is force majeure. So we're back in our standards. So let me scroll through to get to it. And there we are. That was lucky. Can everyone see it okay? Paragraph G is force majeure. So a lot of people have been asking, are we in a condition of force majeure? And I see a lot of additional terms and special addenda where one party or the other is trying to say the parties agree that COVID-related issues are force majeure. Regardless of whether we are or not, this is what happens when you are in a situation of force majeure. So imagine the storm comes on Thursday, June 10th, and we're closing on Monday, June 14th, right? And we can't get insurance. I mean, you shouldn't wait that long, but nevertheless, we can't get insurance until after the storm, right? So until we get the all clear for insurance, we can't close. Now, suddenly everything is all good on Sunday, the 13th. Paragraph G says that we can extend closing for up to 7 days after the end of the force majeure event that prevents performance under the contract. Does that make sense? So if everything is restored on Sunday, the 13th, I can extend for up to 7 days, which puts me on Sunday, the 20th, which means I'm going forward to the next business day, which is Monday, the 21st by 5 p.m. So I've extended my closing by 2 weeks because of the force majeure event. And remember, the event doesn't necessarily have to be something that directly affects the property. It can affect the services that are required for the transaction. So like insurance or lenders. There were instances of lenders who were unable to perform. This was like 4 years ago, because everybody remembers Irma, right? Well, before Irma, guess what? There were storms that hit Texas. And there were lenders who were lending on transactions in this area in Florida, and they were not able to perform because they were literally underwater. And so that would be a condition of force majeure that would invoke this provision in the contract. Even though the property here was fine, nothing happened to it, it was the service provider that was affected. So the contract says that we can continue to delay and delay and delay up to 30 days. So imagine, the event happens on Thursday, June 10th, and 30 days is going to be on Saturday, July 10th. Up until then, we're just going to say, as soon as we get everything restored, we have 7 days to extend our deadlines, and we can just pick up where we were, and we can close, right? But if it goes to one more day, so it's day 31, then we can have the option to terminate the contract. We don't have to keep delaying indefinitely, hoping that things get back and everything is restored and we can close. The interesting thing about this is it says that all of the deadlines in the contract are extended. So imagine that we had just started out. We're not this close to closing. Imagine that we're, the day after the effective date, boom, we get whatever force majeure, and we're going to delay everything up to 30 days. So day 29 into this event, everything is restored again. We're able to operate. We're going to pick right up where we left off with the day after the effective date, right? And then we're going to look at, okay, you've got 2 more days to get your escrow deposit. We've got, 9 more days for our inspection period. Does that make sense? So it's not only the closing that gets delayed potentially, it's every other deadline that's in the contract that could be delayed due to a force majeure event. Okay, I'm going to stop my share. Because those are the critical dates under the as-is contract. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, I see some in the chat. Let me see what's in the chat. Oh, somebody said I missed the second exception to the time frames. So the 2 exceptions to the times are, the first one is the time for acceptance, and then the second one is the effective date. So all the other time periods, if the time period ends on Saturday, Sunday, national legal holiday, we're going to count forward to the next business day at 5 p.m., except for time for acceptance and effective date. Those things happen when they happen. We're not going to move those. Any other questions? Gosh, I can't believe I got through it so quickly. It's because nobody else was talking.
Hi, Sally. Thank you so much for this. It's really helpful. The days are always good.
Oh, good.
Did you say you were going to put that your folder, your file into?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well.
Did you say you were going to put your cheat sheet or your file that you were going through into the chat?
Yeah, I can actually, now that I've seen those typos, I'm gonna probably correct them and then I'll post them on the forum.
Great, excellent, thank you.
Yeah, because I mean, the reference document is good. It's just that the one that I did for today, I obviously missed changing some of the dates, so I want to get that right so that if you're looking at it as an example, it'll make sense and not be wrong.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah. So I will write myself a note or something so I remember to post them in the chat for you. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? It can be just a general question. It doesn't have to necessarily be related to critical dates.
So generally speaking, I would say it's a good idea to track the title commitments. It always seems to me that's the trickiest part when you're laying out the time frame for everything to transpire. It seems like the title commitment dates sometimes can cause you to have to push out the closing date.
Yeah, that's true. So did everyone hear her? She was asking about the title commitment date, the title evidence date, that that may result in pushing out the closing date. I have like an Excel spreadsheet that calculates these things automatically. If anybody's interested in it, I may be able to post it on the forum. So if anyone would like to see it, I'll post. Okay, yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I see some yes in the chat. So yeah, I'll try it. And if it doesn't work, I'll post and say it didn't work. And then everybody let me know and I'll make sure it gets sent out. Yeah, but it's pretty cool. There was an agent in one of the offices who developed it, and he has been kind enough to continue to share it with me. In fact, I was in contact with him earlier this year, and he was like, "Hey, I just updated it. Do you want a new version?" And I said, "Absolutely." So it's great. You just put your initial dates in, and the time periods, like 10 days for inspection, 20 days for loan approval, and then it just calculates everything. It will tell you if you have a time period that goes beyond the closing date. So there's some kind of, quality assurance built into it, I suppose. Question, how can I join the forum? So if you can go onto Facebook and search for KW Florida Broker Forum and submit a request. Okay, the question is, what dates are calendar dates that end at midnight? What dates are business dates? So everything in the contract is calendar days. In standards, in paragraph 18, it says that we count calendar days. However, if one of those time periods ends on a Saturday, Sunday, or national legal holiday, then we're going to count forward to the next business day, and the business days end at 5 p.m. So anytime you have to adjust the end of a time period to the business day, it's going to end at 5 p.m. Otherwise, it's the calendar day that ends just before midnight. So I had an interesting conversation with my son this morning. He lives up in the Kansas City area, and he was talking to a neighbor who's a realtor, and his wife is a realtor. The wife had an interesting situation. Their market is just as crazy as our market. So what happened was the sellers had accepted this all cash offer, waived all of the inspection rights and all this kind of stuff to be competitive. And then the buyer's agent called up the listing agent and said, hey, the buyers are really excited. They want to bring their family over to look at the property. Is that okay? And the listing agent said, yeah, sure, go ahead. And so they did. And the seller started getting all these alarms from their Ring doorbell about, and so they started looking into it. And here's like, the electric company, the electrician, not the electric company, but an electrician coming, and here's the plumbing company, and here's the something else company, and so the listing agent called the buyer's agent and was like, hey, what's going on? They're doing inspections? You waived inspections. Oh no, that's just their family. Like what? Uncle Fred with the plumbing company, and Uncle George with the sewer inspection company, and Uncle Sparky, the electrician? I don't think so. And so the buyer's agents just kept insisting, it's their family, that's their family. They just wanted to look at it. And then the sellers were able to access and download video and audio of privacy rights. That's a different issue, but nevertheless, from their security system, they downloaded it And they had conversations of these business people who were obviously not related to the buyers, having conversations with them about it. So it seemed like a pretty underhanded and sneaky way to get a contract accepted and then sneak around and get inspections done when you had waived rights to inspect. So interesting situation. But when it's competitive, people do things that they probably shouldn't do. And when the listing agent called this buyer's agent on it, he never admitted anything, but he went very silent. So probably not a good situation to be in. So any questions? I just finished developing a course for continuing education. It's actually all packed up, ready to take to the post office and mail it to DBPR to hopefully get approval for accreditation. It's going to be on fair housing and bias. It's a bundle of 3 hours. Each hour can be taken individually or it could be taken as a bundle. So is that something that people would be interested in taking if you had the opportunity to take that course? Yes, I see a head nodding. I see a thumbs up. Yeah, good. Good. Well, I hope so. So I have no idea how long it's going to take DBPR to get it approved. Hopefully it won't be too bad since I'm able to process it through the real estate school that I have, Prosperity. So I'll keep you posted on it. But 3 hours, it'll be fun. First hour is the statutory and constitutional framework. Hour 2 is a practicum where we look at actual cases and we talk about disparate impact issues with HUD guidance. And then part 3 is more like we talk about NAR's Code of Ethics with the standard 10-5 that recently came out last November. So it should be fun.
Sallie, what's your book about?
Oh, my book. It is a very high level overview of a life coaching program that I developed called Reboot Your Thinking. And so you can, I don't know if you can see the title in the background, but it's a quick guide to reboot your thinking with MSG. And MSG stands for mindset, skill set, get off your asset.
That's great. I love it.
Yeah. And that's, I'm actually contributing author to a business acronym book, and that's going to be in that book. That should be coming out this summer.
Awesome. Good luck. I'll go buy one.
Thank you. Sorry, my dog's barking in the background. I can hear him.
Sallie, are you?
Ooh. There was a lot of feedback there, but I see something in the chat. Go over the rider. Yeah, so the purpose of that language that Murray and I kind of came up with was to address the issue where we see appraisals coming in lower because a lot of purchase prices are over list, right? And yet the appraisals, I apologize for the dog, the appraisals are not yet keeping pace with it, which really it's frustrating, and it really is probably a good thing so that the market isn't totally going crazy. And so what the point of that is to try to protect the buyer in those instances where we agree upfront that the buyer will pay X amount in addition to whatever the appraised value is up to a certain amount, right? And so when you use that in conjunction with the appraisal contingency addendum, then the buyer would have the option to terminate the contract and get the escrow back. So rather than, addressing it because there's so many calls coming in on the issue, maybe this will help. Does that address the question? Is there more information that you would like about that? I see another one. Okay, thank you. During an inspection period, if the deadline is on Saturday, is that the actual deadline? No, it would be the next business day at 5 p.m. So in our example, if let's say the inspection period ends on May 29th, which is Saturday, and Sunday is a weekend, right? And then Monday is Memorial Day. That's a national legal holiday. So it would extend to the next business day, which would be Tuesday, June 1st at 5 p.m. Yeah, so anytime the period, like the inspection period, ends on Saturday, Sunday, national legal holiday, it doesn't really end. We're going to extend it to the next business day at 5 p.m.
Sally,
Yes.
could you emphasize line 419?
Line 419.
Yep.
Okay, let me share my screen. Sometimes it feels like it, but I haven't actually memorized all the lines. So 419.
Sorry, 420.
Oh, okay. 420. Yeah.
You know that by heart.
Okay. Yeah. So paragraph F, this is what we we're just talking about. So this is in paragraph 18 of the standards. And in fact, I teach a class on the standards because they're kind of like the flyover part of the contract, but they're really the infrastructure of the contract. It tells us how everything else works. So in this case, we're talking about time, and it says we count calendar days when we compute all of the time periods. It says time is of the essence, and that's just like a legal term of art. That means we're serious about time. And then here are our exceptions, right? Except for time for acceptance and the effective date. When any of our time periods end on a Saturday, Sunday, or national legal holiday, then we're going to go to 5 p.m. of the next business day. And this is important, where the property is located. Okay. Because I've heard people say, well, they were in California and they said it was 5 p.m. No, it's where the property is located. And that actually does happen. So be aware when it's 5 p.m. here, that's what counts, right? Not 5 p.m. somewhere. Has to be where your property is located. Good point to draw attention to it. Thank you. All right. Anything else? Gosh, people are so quiet.
The only other one would be line 599.
Okay.
That's one that Bob and I, and we've talked about it. We don't know why it's not on the first page up at the top. It'll help agents to stay out of trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So
Bold
yeah.
letters, like they're shouting at you, all capitals.
Yes. Yeah. An asterisk means that there's a blank and it should be completed. And even if there's a default, and even if you're using the default, write it in. Because I've heard agents with heartbreaking stories where they didn't fill it in because it was default, and somebody else filled it in with a different date or a different amount, and they didn't catch it. because they weren't looking, because why would they, right? And it was not a happy ending. So if it calls for something to be written in, write it in, even if it's the default.
Thank you.
Yeah, when I teach for the board, I usually start at the back page because there's so much stuff on the back page that really, you're right, should be on the front page at the very beginning. Like at the top of the page, this is a legally binding contract. Seek the advice of an attorney. Yeah, I mean, I recommend when you're talking to a buyer or a seller about it, take them to that page first and let them know, look, this is real. This is a contract. If you have questions, talk to your lawyer. Show them that first and then talk about the contract. It's interesting also that this has been approved by Florida Realtors and Florida Bar. That's why we call it FAR Bar, right? FAR Bar as is, FAR Bar standard. FAR Bar standard and FAR Bar as is, those are the two that are approved by Florida Realtors and Florida Bar. Some of the other contracts are not approved by both.
Hi, Sally, it's Renee. I have a question.
Okay.
So I had a property that was supposed to close in 2 weeks.
Mhm.
It was a property that was my husband's and my son's, and my son passed away last week.
Oh, I'm
And
so
about,
sorry, Renee.
yeah, he was 39. It was very unexpected. But 6 months ago, they had signed a piece of paper, not a legal document, that stated, because they have different properties and LLCs together, that this particular property was just going to be my husband's. So she was pretty much an estranged wife, called me yesterday and said, guess what? You can't sell that property because we never had this notarizer. So this is going to be a big nightmare. My basic question is, so I'm going to extend the date because the buyers they're in no hurry to move in. They understand what's going on. It's a cash sale. Is there a date? How long can you have a contract? Can we just keep extending the date for closing or
Yeah.
what? I
Yeah.
can't. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Is there certain wording that we use in the addenda to state that the date's going to be extended?
Just say the parties agree that the closing date is extended to, and then put the new date.
Okay. Parties agree. What was that again?
Closing date is extended to, and then you just put the new date.
Okay. All righty. Yeah, because title now is just it's gonna be a nightmare. Oh Lordy.
Yeah,
So anyway,
I'm so sorry.
oh gosh. All righty.
Now,
And
now another thing is that this would potentially be a title defect. And so you could go under those provisions, and the contract clearly sets out what happens. There's a 30-day cure period. And beyond that, the buyer can extend to up to 120 days. So that would, give you additional time.
right.
So
I've been listening to your class, and I went in and told my husband that, and he goes, Renee, it's not going to happen that soon, because she's just fighting everything. She didn't even allow us to. It's horrible. It's a really bad situation. So anyway, it's going to be just not nifty. Okay. And the other thing is then now I also have to, because it's an Airbnb and we haven't actually been able to sell it as soon as possible, because every time we get a contract signed, then they've been booking these other weeks. So now we also have to change the original contract, and I've got to extend the contract. So it's just like everything that could go wrong is going wrong.
yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you very much. I'd sent this all in an email, but I guess I don't need to send it to you now. So I'll just write parties agree closing date is extended to such and such. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. You're welcome.
All right. Bye.
So in May, I can't remember the date now. But we have a guest who's going to be coming in to talk about estate and probate issues. So that's going to be very interesting. She, sorry, my screen defaulted to a reminder and I couldn't see the Zoom screen. The person who's speaking is, I met her through another group I'm in, and this is her specialty. And I've seen some of her presentations, and I've really enjoyed hearing the information. I think it'll be very helpful to you. So if we're looking for people like that to come in and talk about other issues. I have somebody lined up for later in the summer to talk about floodplain management. Does that sound interesting to people?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Talk about flood insurance and all that kind of stuff. She's a specialist in the area. If there are other specialized topics you would like to hear about, let me know. I have someone who could talk about eminent domain if that's of interest to you. He was actually on an event that I did a couple of months ago and he talked about eminent domain. Again, very interesting, I thought. All right, anything else? Yeah, and if you do think of other topics like that, where we could maybe reach out and find somebody who specializes in that area, let us know and we'll see who we can find.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Sally. These are wonderful.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I appreciate that you came in to hear about it, and I will see you next week, I guess. I think I'm on for next week again. So
Thanks,
bye,
Sally.
everybody. Thank you. Bye,
Hey,
everybody.
Have a great
Sally,
day.
do you have a date for that class for the probate?
I believe it's the 27th.
All right, thank you.